Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Coach. This morning I want to talk about worship. Over the last year, we've had our forms of worship change dramatically. Last February, we were all in worship in church. And then in March, we were all not in worship in church. We were online in various states of online. Some of that went really well, some of that not so well. So I'm going to talk with two pastors from Colorado who experienced that in different ways and handled that in different ways, and hopefully give you some wisdom about going forward. What will we be doing with worship when we come out of the pandemic? Stick around. I'm Steve Petty, and I have 3 goals for these videos: to help you become a better pastor and leader, to save you time and money, and to help educate, energize, and motivate you to energize and motivate your church. Today's coffee cup comes from Mexico, a mission project we supported called Give Ye Them to Eat. The missionaries taught the local people how to grow crops better and how to take care of their animals better and be better able to feed themselves. If you'd like to see your coffee cup featured on Coffee with Coach, I'd love to talk to you about that. Send me an email. You'll see the email there on your link. And since these videos are new, I would really love it if you subscribe to this video channel. You can do that by clicking the red button down there in the corner. Let me know that you find them valuable. That would be helpful to me. Thank you. It's almost a year now we have been doing worship online. What things have we learned along the way? Different churches have reacted in different ways. But when this is all over, what will be next? 2 of my children are pastors in United Methodist churches in Colorado. Lisa and Dave bring different perspectives and backgrounds to the task of preaching and leading worship. Today we're going to find out what has worked for them in this new online worship age and where they think things might be going. David is our youngest. He is the pastor at the Meeker United Methodist Church in the small town of Meeker, Colorado. At 2,500 population, it is the county seat and the largest town in the county. Now that is a rural county. In normal times, the church averages about 90 to 100 people in attendance. When COVID hit, they had to shut down. Over the summer, they held some worship events on the church lawn. But recently, they've moved back in the sanctuary, but only about 30 socially distanced people attend. Others connect to the online service. Lisa is the pastor of the Montrose United Methodist Church in Montrose, Colorado. It is also the county seat and the largest town, with almost 20,000 people. A year ago, she led 3 worship services every Sunday morning, averaging nearly 300 in worship. They went online immediately in March of 2020. Over the summer, they met in a nearby city park, but recently they have gone back to strictly online worship. Welcome, Lisa and Dave. So I would like to introduce you to the Reverends Petties. My children, 2 of my 4 children, Lisa Petty is the senior pastor at the Montrose United Methodist Church. Wave, Lisa, so they'll know who you are. She's the one without the beard. And my son, David Petty, is the pastor in the Meeker United Methodist Church. Hey, Dave. I already used your coffee cup once.
And I don't have a coffee cup to give you yet.
I know. What's wrong
I'm sure
with that?
somewhere around here I have mine, and I will send it.
Yeah, they're somewhere in a deep bin in the
Coat
fellowship
closet.
hall in a box. It's been unopened for 38 years. Something like that. Yeah, I know that. Okay. Both of them do different worship. Both of them have, in the course of the year, have worshiped in their sanctuary, have worshiped only online, Lisa's even had worship in the park. But it's tough in this day and age to do worship, and they both bring a different set of skills to this task. And so I want to start with Lisa, because I think Lisa's done some amazing things in the way that she pivoted quickly to doing online worship at Montrose. And maybe, Lisa, you could explain to us how that went for you and what you discovered in the process of that. Lisa is really, really good with the artistic sense of how to bring worship to us, and very good at being personally engaging with the congregation when she leads her worship. So I'm going to let Lisa share with you.
Sure. You can see actually even my setup today, one of my rules of being on camera, which I quickly realized was this rule of third for your artistic eye, that our eyes like things in thirds. And so I am not centered on my screen. I'm off to the side and I have my cross wall here in the background. And that's kind of how I set up my shots for worship. When I realized that we were going to be competing with all sorts of other YouTube channels and videos and things that people could be watching online virtually, that we needed to have something that was visually stimulating for people. And I wanted to be up close and personal. And there is some beautiful sanctuaries. Ours is one of the most beautiful sanctuaries I've ever worshiped in and had the privilege of being pastor at. And yet, it is really difficult for people to see these really wide shots and watch a little teeny person on the screen when preaching. And so I realized, especially when we're looking at worship that's competing with other things, that it wanted to come across almost not like a news broadcast, but that up close and personal, like a news broadcast. And so I speak directly to the screen, directly into the camera, if you will, which is not something that I have any expertise in, but quickly realized that people wanted that personal touch and wanted to be able to see faces up close, whether it be mine or somebody who's reading scripture. And so we try and do that. I have yet to use a virtual background, but what I do is ask my worship leaders to put together some visually stimulating space. And so on our altar or our communion table, for whatever the theme is for the Sunday or for the liturgical season, we have put together a couple of really cool backgrounds. And I think I might have some pictures for you, but that you'll be able to see. We had for Easter, the one thing that we did was we were at the very beginning, probably some like you in pandemic, was we weren't supposed to leave our houses, and so I wanted to set an example for the congregation, not leave my home. And so I did our Easter worship out of I converted my dining room into our worship space and put an Easter lily and a candle and some stuff that then actually I stood in front of and preached. Um, and that has been, I have gotten feedback that people enjoy that. We know that people are visual. We know that not everybody is an auditory learner, so you don't just want to sit and listen. You also want something to look at. And so that's another thing that I've been pretty particular about in trying to provide for people as they engage in worship. That it's, yes, you're looking at me, but when you get bored of looking at me, you're looking at all my crosses and wondering where they come from, or whatever else is in the background of my shot for our virtual Sundays. So that's just a little bit of what I have done, and then I've gotten really good feedback on, is to continue to bring something that's really personal, but then also visually stimulating.
Okay, thank you. One of the things you also do at your church is that you have somebody signing.
Yeah,
for the hymns and things that go on.
We do. We have been fortunate that one of the things that we have in our congregation is a signing choir, and it came about because we had a youth who was interested in learning American Sign Language, and as she has learned over the years, she said, "Well, she approached me and said, "Can I sign for worship?" And I said, "That would be amazing." And so at different times we had her sign music in worship when we were physically in the building. And then they would put on signing. We actually had some performances of the signing choir that she leads now, which has about 20 people in it. And so for Christmas Eve, we actually had the signing choir do some of our stuff. And for normal Sunday worship, every song or hymn that we present in our virtual worship, she is actually in a shot on the side signing the entire thing. And as we move along, we'd like her to sign more, but for now we're trying to put a little less on her plate as she's moving into her college years. But we hope that she'll engage some of our other people in our signing choir to do some more of the signing, because I would love for some of our scripture to be signed, if the message could be signed. But that takes a little bit more time, especially with a student who's learning versus somebody who actually knows how to do the signing. but also it is visually stimulating. It's exciting to watch. Even if you're not somebody who wants to sing along, you watch her, and sign language is pretty beautiful.
I remember she did one up on top of a mountain with snow all around her. She was out in the outdoors signing as the hymn was going on. That was really cool. It was beautiful. It was beautiful expression of the hymn, as well as a good signing experience.
Yeah, yeah, she does a great job of that.
Dave, your situation's been a little bit different, but you also come from a highly technical background. You started doing audio and visual stuff in the church, and you also have a degree in TV film production. So you come at this whole thing with a different sense of what's important. Could you share some of that with us?
Sure. Probably first and foremost, you got to make sure your mic is unmuted when talking. Even the best laid plans, I will say, get beset by some sort of technical glitch. We have probably all experienced some tech glitch at some point during all of this, trying to worship online, and whether it's live or pre-recorded. Technology is a beautiful and wonderful thing, but understanding too, it can always go wrong. So I come at this usually from a production standpoint. My first, obviously as a pastor, my first concern is the quality of the content. But beyond that, beyond just the quality of my message or my words, I want to make sure that everything is as technically proficient as possible. Because I think that early on, I had an experience of going to see, I don't remember if it was a sermon or a performance, where it was very difficult to understand words that were being spoken through a PA system. And that was jarring, so much so that I walked away not even remembering what I had heard because I couldn't hear the words. And so one realization I've had through all of this is that we preach and we worship in a primarily auditory medium. You can have most worship services translate well into an audio only format. If you did a podcast or, just listen into the worship service, you can hear the hymns, you can listen to the scripture being read, you can listen to the sermon being preached, but they don't translate very well into a visual only format. Unless perhaps you've got somebody who's, unable to hear or hard of hearing and have a person signing. But most of our sermons are not as visually engaging as they are auditorily engaging. So I want to make sure that my audio quality is proficient, that it's able to come through with the least obstacles possible. And then, video quality is important too, but not nearly as much so. So when it comes to video, more important than the quality of the camera you're using is the quality of your lighting. So you might not see my lights on screen, but I actually have two lights in here that allow me to be well lit. As you can see, if I turn them both off, I go completely into darkness. I'm backlit. My camera's got to adjust.
Where'd you go?
Suddenly, my Zoom is trying to put me in a fish tank. It's all sorts of weird. So if I turn the lights back on, let the camera readjust, now it's better. Now you can see my face. The microphone is a tough thing to deal with because it's in the shot, but you can get as you've got a boom mic kind of sitting right in front of you. A lot of people prefer a lavalier mic. Those are some options that you can get to make sure that your sound sounds decent. But I've known some folks who during this whole pandemic have taken the phone, set at the very back of the sanctuary, and the phone does a great job shooting the video, but the mic from the back of the sanctuary picks up more echo than it does voice. So, distance from mic to person is important. But all of that being said, then I often forget because I'm so worried about the tech of the what's behind me, or am I centered, or why is this weird post coming out of my head? I had one week we recorded a sermon, and Amberly, my wife, mentioned to me afterwards, the candle flame is right on top of your head in the whole shot. It's like, oh, phooey. So that was one of the reasons I especially love Lisa's take on it, to say, hey, you got to pay attention to those little things of what's behind you. So yeah, definitely different approaches, different ways of going about getting the message across, and different focus.
And I think there's, just to tag on to that in terms of your looking at auditory stuff, one of the things that the way that I record Sunday morning worship is actually I went online and I bought this little teeny mic that actually plugs into your phone jack. Well, I actually no. Now with this little dongle, it plugs into my phone and or my iPad. And so I actually then clip this on. So this is right here so that the sound quality is good. And then I also set my iPad, which is less than 3 feet from me. So there's plenty of cord here. And that's, there's actually, I've got a shot that is this is what you would see if you were sitting in the sanctuary with all of the music stands that I use to set up different things in my lighting so that everybody can see. And I set up my shot, if you will, stuff they don't teach you in seminary. And then but I use my iPad and I put the mic on it, and then it's good quality, because I quickly realized that my tech person who does all of our sound mixing and all of our AV tech stuff, he was having to crank up the volume on my stuff all the time because I was, when we started, using either something like this or just the mic on my iPad. And that, in a massive sanctuary, when I was setting up shots, it just is too echoey and really hard. And so, I mean, I think I paid $35 or something for this. So that was really helpful.
Yeah, from a technical standpoint, I would often refer to a phrase called signal to noise ratio, which is, how loud is your signal versus how loud is the stuff you don't want. And so if your signal, think about it in terms of distance, that if your microphone is, here 6 inches from my face, and, let's say the echo bouncing off my room has to go 20 feet, the signal is going to be much louder than the noise. But if I move the microphone back and I start talking like this, you're getting more echo and not a lot of signal. So, I encourage people to think about the distance from their mouth to the microphone compared to their distance from their mouth to a wall to the microphone, because you're going to hear all of those sounds. The other thing to point out is if you're going to get a microphone like this, like a podcasting microphone, try to make it a directional microphone that picks up a lot of sound from the front and not a lot of sound from the back. So some technical considerations when coming to mics.
This is true. I've experimented with different mics doing Coffee with Coach, and several of them just didn't work. I mean, the initial stages, even the podcast sound was bad. And I had one that was a little lavalier, but it was omnidirectional, so it picked up everything in the room. I finally settled on this one here because it's highly directional. I can point it right at my face, and it picks up predominantly the voice that's coming from me. And I found that this is a better quality sound product because it's very close to me. You can't see it, but it's there, and it makes a huge difference in the sound. So those are really important points. What other things can you think about that you've had to work with in terms of getting worship out there on the line? Anything come to mind?
Well, I'll throw out there one struggle that we've had, and I think it's a conversation everybody's having now, is, we went from in-person to online, and now for our context, we went from online back to in-person. And so we're live streaming the in-person, but the quality of the experience for those live streaming the in-person worship service has now gone down because it's not as good as when we were on camera like this with a close mic. Because if I have a camera this distance and a mic this distance while I'm in the sanctuary, people are going to go, well, I can't see it because there's a camera in front of your face. So, I'm wondering, not that I have answers, but I'm curious to hear your guys' take. How do we balance the need for quality in online worship and balance the need for quality for in-person worship? Does one take precedence over the other? Do you just go where more people are? How do we make those decisions?
So we, at the point we were able to relaunch our worship service in person, which we only did for 4 weeks before we shut back down, just because of COVID numbers, we did both. And we made a decision as staff and as worship team that we were going to go ahead and produce an online worship And then we were also going to completely separately have worship in person. And we made that decision pretty intentionally. And we've talked about what it looks like in the coming months, because it looks like we will probably be doing that again, hopefully, and that we will continue to produce something totally different online. And I know that for us, we made that decision based on looking at the people who attend our worship service. Before pandemic, we had 3 worship services on Sunday morning. So I preached 3 times. We had different musical groups at all 3 of our services. And so we did, you could call it producing, but it was live worship 3 different times on Sunday morning. So our work was actually kind of condensed into that Sunday morning. But if you look at the people that were attending our worship service from in person and then now online, we are picking up a lot of people who are worshiping with us regularly, who live anywhere from an hour away up in Grand Junction to across the country. And they are kids of people who go to our church, or they are cousins, or they're some type of family member. And they said, oh, you know, my friend or my cousin so-and-so goes to your church, and they'll chat in the comment section or send me an email. And they'll let us know that they are worshiping. We have actually amazingly been able to, for some of these people, make them giving members. They're not members yet, but they are always in worship. They're always commenting online and interacting with other people who are worshiping. But then they're also sending checks into the mail that we get. And so they believe in the ministry that we're doing. And so for us, once we saw those types of things, we said it is worth it for us to continue to produce something that is that is good online, and it is going to look very different than when we do worship in person. And so when we go back to worship in person, when we relaunch again, we will probably continue to do a completely separate worship service, just because it's a better quality for anybody worshiping at home. And because they're probably not going to drive the hour to come down and have worship with us, or from wherever. But that's just us. That's what we decided. And again, just getting the feedback of people really enjoying the personal feel that we give them. So all the people that read scripture, they're this close to the camera on Sunday mornings. And it just feels more intimate for everybody. At least that's the feedback we've gotten so far. So for us, it's worth it, even though it is 2 separate worship services and the time is different than just a whole lot of time on Sunday mornings. For us, it's just it's worth it for us.
Well, I think that, you know, as you know, the last church I served, we went to broadcasting live Sunday morning and then archiving the worship service 10 years ago. And we spent the money. We put in a 3-camera gimbaled set on the front of the balcony. So we were able to switch video pictures. We were able to zoom in and zoom out, show the whole choir, show the band, do all of those trick things. And it wasn't too expensive. It cost us, I think, about $20,000 to get the whole thing done. But we discovered almost immediately that we had a different congregation watching online, that we had a congregation of people that were watching from Texas and Ohio and Illinois, and it was really kind of fun. So we have 2 services on Sunday morning, 1 band and 1 choir, and then we have a 3rd service that people watch either one as we put them up on the website. That church was really well positioned when we got to COVID, because they had all the equipment and they had all the technical ability to do that. Churches that haven't done that have had a difficult time pivoting. Not everybody has done it well. But I think there's a couple different nuances that people aren't necessarily understanding. One is that we've actually taught our congregation that they don't have to watch on Sunday morning. You know, once we put it up, they can watch it later on. So if all of a sudden Sunday morning is busy, they can watch it Tuesday night. They can watch it Thursday afternoon. They can go online and pull it down anytime and watch the worship service. And so even in the future, I think people are going to know that, well, if my Sunday schedule is such that I don't, I'm not able to get to church, that's okay. I can watch later. It's available to me, and probably quicker. I mean, many of the services that are online services are 30 to 40 minutes. And a lot of what you're losing is the time people spend walking, or the time that we spent passing a plate, or those long gaps of time that if you're sitting in worship are a little bit boring. But you've managed to travel there, you've driven your car, you're going to stick around for coffee. You get the advantage of being with your friends. You cannot get that over the internet. But you can watch later in the week in a shorter, tighter service. You get the essence of the message. You get the spiritual contact with your people. And so that's something we've taught people they have the ability to do. And when we go back to in-person worship, a lot of people are going to go, well, I kind of liked it when we did it this way. And so maybe twice a week or twice a month, I'll go to online worship, and twice a month I'll do it in-person worship, depending on my schedule and the freedom I have of watching TV when I want. And that's the other thing, is that as we've shifted from broadcast television to internet television, you can watch your shows whenever you want to watch them. You're not glued to sitting down and watching them when they're broadcast. You don't even have to go back to your VCR and wind it and unwind it. You just say, I go to my YouTube TV site or my CBS online site or Peacock or whatever you want to go to, and I can watch my show. Well, that freedom that people have goes back to the church. Can I have that same freedom with my worship service? Is that going to work for me as well and as easily? And I think going forward, we are going to find that people really like that and like that freedom and expect it from their church. So I'm pretty sure that churches that will thrive in the future will decide to make a concerted effort to present a quality worship service that is online, that is substantially different from the qualitative service that they do in person, and yet the message will be the same, but the quality will be entirely different. But the quality will be high in both. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and to your point, I would say it doesn't necessarily, we have gone to doing two totally different things because we do not have the high quality cameras. We don't have a gimbal system. We don't have those things that will allow for these close shots that look really good. And so probably you can bring a really quality service if you had a lot of the high tech stuff. And if you filled in some of those gaps where you are waiting for somebody walking someplace from one place to another, if you figure out how to fill some of those things, you could produce just one service that is online and that people are in worship together. And I think I think it just depends on what you actually have available to you. What funds do you have? Can you make something? Can you create a system that will allow you to do some of these things to bring quality worship virtually to people? But also to your point, people like to be able to have the freedom to do things. They like even just when we used to have 3 services, most people had a service that they would choose to go to, but they liked the freedom to be able to, if they wanted, go ahead and go to breakfast and then come to service that's a different service. And so here, having worship online allows people to have that whenever they want at their fingertips. And they do. People like choices.
Yeah, I think people like choices. I think people like the ability to be flexible with their time. We've seen that with education as well. Going to asynchronous learning, a lot of online school is not that you have to attend an online class at a particular time, but the professor will record something or the teacher will record something and then you can watch it later. And maybe there's 1 or 2 communal gathering times, but for the most part, it's kind of do it at your own pace. I do think, though, there is a question that needs to be asked, or maybe at some point we're going to ask ourselves, is where do we find the balance between that, flexibility and that, that ease of just kind of watch my show whenever I want. And I think there is a value inherent in, sacred ritual, in the sacredness of gathering as a large body, that are, it's the reason why I'm thinking as we're coming up to the Super Bowl, yes, you could record the Super Bowl, but there's something about watching the Super Bowl happen at the same time that millions of people around the country are watching the Super Bowl. It's also a comfort to me every time I watch the halftime show to know that millions of dollars have been poured into the production of making a live show and a quality online show or on broadcast. And yet there's always technical difficulties and it never sounds amazing. So I'm like, okay, if we're struggling and they're struggling, we're okay. Yeah. But I do think at some point we need to reframe, if we're going to go to a lot of asynchronous things, what are those really special things that we say we are going to gather in person as a large body because this thing is important, and how much more special that'll make that thing because we're gathering than the asynchronous nature of not gathering on a regular basis. Questions to ponder for the future.
I think that's a really good point. And I think that one of the things that I've always tried to emphasize when I'm coaching churches is that you need to have something really special at least once a month, if not twice, that you're going to invite people to that's special. So, we have some of those built in: Christmas, Easter, Palm Sunday, some of those high holy days that people expect to be there, but then you need to have some others. Well, next week's Valentine's Day. Are you going to have a special Valentine's Day service? Is there something you're going to be giving out that tells people that that's a really important day to come? In COVID, we can't do that. But when we get to the point that we can have in-house worship, I think those special events become even more crucial, because those are the events when you're going to ask the whole community to come for that community event and that wonderful shared worship service, which they'll love. You get the full house, you get the big choir, you get a wonderful worship experience like a live concert. Those will be important, but we also need some down days in between where we say, "Oh, this is a little bit less important Sunday, so it's not going to spend as much effort with this one." But the quality of your in-house worship has to be high every single Sunday, even if it's not Easter and Christmas. So we're going to be doing all of that as we try to keep the continuity of our congregation and their ability to gather together and feel the love of one another. That's going to be even more profound coming out of COVID than it was before. But we're gonna have to be online too, so it's going to be an interesting process. But it will be expensive, and it will mean more time for the pastors, because ultimately, pastors are the producers. You're the one that sees the whole package, understands the music, understands the liturgy, understands the primary message and theme of the morning. You're the one that has to produce all of that. And sometimes pastors just forget that. They just kind of throw pieces together and, oh, well, I'll need a liturgy, and I'll need a hymn, and and pull those things in. Now you're producing a show every single week. So good things to think about. Well, I thank you both for taking the time to share with us on Coffee with Coach. And I really appreciate the worship services that both of you lead. So any last thoughts you have before we sign off?
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for letting us join you in this fun conversation.
Well, I may have to do this in the future. It's always good to see you. Thanks so much for sharing. That's what we're going to do today for Coffee with Coach. Next week, I have another surprise guest because it's Black History Month. I have one of my favorite African-American preachers who will be sharing with us what he sees going on in the African-American church as we talk about leadership on third Mondays. So something to look forward to at Coffee with Coach. Thank you. Have a great week.